Welcome back. Simon Chapman, we were talking earlier about penalties and possible changes you'd like to see. Is it too easy to get a shooter's licence?
I think it's far too easy. I think the definition needs to be tightened up immensely. I was very disturbed what Mr. Drain had to say about having clubs that people could get into where they can play around with military weapons. I mean, we wouldn't indulge the community by having hand grenade thrower clubs or Semtex clubs, you know, for people to play around. And I just don't think that we're, in a civilised society, ought to indulge the fantasies of people by saying you can get in there, register yourself in a military club and blast away.
Do you see this as a critical moment in this whole debate? Because we've really been down this path many times before, haven't we? Is this a critical moment?
We have, and I think that if John Howard and all the state premiers and police ministers don't come to the party this time, people are so cynical about political inaction on this, the way in which the shooters' parties around the country and the clubs have been influencing the political process. Mr. Drain said that the National Rifle Association hadn't much to do with his group. Well, the president of that group, Bob Corbyn, was out here on a speaking tour several years ago and received immense publicity around the country. People have called me from the north coast of New South Wales, have told me that it was widespread knowledge that for $10,000 you could get from the NRA, you could set up a local branch.
Well, Professor, given that this is a critical moment, what are the three key things you want out of the Gun Summit, and what penalties would you like to see apply to those who don't comply?
We want national registration, we want an end to lifetime licences, and we want tightening up of the definition of a need to own a gun, so that it's much harder. You can't just say, oh yes, I want one, I'm a hunter, you know, I'm a sporting shooter or whatever. This needs to be looked in a lot more detail.
And what about those people who don't comply?
I think there ought to be very, very tough penalties, and I think John Howard also ought to introduce a year-round Operation Noah type exercise where people who, for example, have heard someone bragging in the pub that they've got these things, or an ex-girlfriend or a wife who's terrified about the gun in the cupboard, can ring up a number and those incidents can be investigated. The people who've got them, who've refused to register them, don't just get a slap over the wrist, they get a very, very hard fine indeed, or if not, a term in jail.
And if Friday fails, the meeting of the police ministers this coming Friday, if that fails, what then?
Look, this is a test for John Howard's political leadership. John Howard, I think, will dare not fail that. It's his first test of leadership. He's not going to come out of that meeting saying, oh, well, we tried and I didn't win.
Should stronger gun laws be mirrored, do you think, with tougher laws on video games and censorship laws?
I think this is a question that we all need to look into. I think there's a lot of plausibility in the notion that kids playing these things with now video screen models where they're shooting at real people, the person twitches and writhes and blood spurts out and so forth. I mean, I think we've got to look at that.
So will you push that through the opposition and the Democrats in the Senate then?
Look, I know Senator Cuno is particularly concerned about this aspect of things, and I would be very surprised if the debate doesn't move on to that afterwards, yes.
And a referendum?
A referendum, I think, will only be necessary if we see inaction after next Friday.
All right, Simon Chapman, we have run out of time. We have to leave it there. Our thanks to Professor Simon Chapman from the University of Sydney, and earlier, of course, Ted Drain of the Sporting Shooters Association. On our panel tonight, Lisa McLean from the Australian and the 7 Network's Glenn Milne. Thanks to you too at home. We'll be back on Face to Face next week. Till then, good night.